Welcome to the Ultradian podcast. I've started this podcast because in this world of divisiveness and fear, we don't often hear people talk about how great they are. And so what I've done is designed a podcast to do just that. People come on my show and they are forced to own what is excellent and great about themselves. Please enjoy. Have a great day. Good morning. Welcome to the Ultradian podcast. My guest today is Andrew Lassise, who I have had the privilege of getting to know over the last several months through a meeting that we both attend and he runs. And he is both sober for many, many years, as well as a successful entrepreneur who did an exit on his company. And today what we're going to talk about is a few things. We're going to talk about who he was and who he is today. We're going to talk about how he grew his business incrementally. And we're going to talk about how he has built his sobriety incrementally as well. So welcome, Andrew. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Andrew Lassise. I guess I still am, depending on how you view things, raging alcoholic turned sober for the last 13 some years, but it's still deeply embedded in me, as well as lifelong serial entrepreneur / I don't like the way things are, so I'm going to do it my way. Lots of, and that pretty much summarizes my entire life of I see something done one way and I question it and then do my way. And for better or worse, it's probably been a net positive. However, there have been plenty of negative drawbacks from that, of banging my head against the wall when the answer was there all along. And I just needed to surrender and realize that I don't know everything as much as I think that I do. I have come to the realization, maybe not so much in practice, but I am at least aware that I have the tendency to think I know better, even when I don't. And that's what kept me drinking alcoholically, blackout, daily drinker for about 10 years until the judge let me know that that's no longer acceptable unless I want to go to jail.
If it hadn't been a judge, would it have affected you?
If it weren't a judge, I mean, for a long time, it wasn't a judge. And even the judge telling me, I still wasn't convinced that it was actually a problem. It was more just wrong place, wrong time, which, if you're driving in a blackout, that's very much a wrong place, wrong time. And fortunately, there were no accident. Nobody was hurt. I was being pulled over. I recall I'm at the hockey game. I was living in Maryland at the time. I was at a hockey game in DC, and I lived about an hour north. And I remember being at the game, and it was the second period. If we look at January 24th, 2013, the Capitals are playing the Canadiens. They're down, it was, I think, 3-0 at the end of the second period. And we were like, this is dumb. Let's leave. Fast forward, and I'm being pulled over. And this was like a time shift. This wasn't let me tell you what happens next. It was I teleport, realize I'm driving and I'm being pulled over. I have in the passenger seat a half bottle of Fireball whiskey. And in my drunken stupor, I think, if I drink the rest of that, I will get in less trouble. So I pound a half of a bottle of Fireball whiskey while being pulled over for a DUI, get in extra trouble because of that, because a .24 is way worse than whatever my blackout blood alcohol content was. That I got extra charges because of it. You can get a charge for drinking while driving as well as driving under the influence. So I got 6 charges. My lawyer says put a breathalyzer in your car to prove it was a one-time accident. I failed the preventative breathalyzer 3 more times before court. It's not information you can just keep to yourself. You have to upload the results every month. So I go to court with a police DUI as well as 3 failed blows on my own accord, proving that I don't frequently drink and drive. So the judge decided that I had a choice of rehab or jail. I chose the former and was fortunate enough that it stuck. And here we are 13 years later. So it was the worst day of my life in 2013. And now reflecting in 2026, one of the most important, best days of my life.
Right. What a blessing it turned out to be. So tell me about your business. Let's talk about your business first.
If we go way back, my first business, I was 14, 15, something like that, early 2000s. In high school, I was buying big lots of those, if you recall, those Nokia not smartphones, those Nokia phones. And you could put custom cases on it, like an American flag or smiley faces and stuff. So my first hustle was buying lots of those and then reselling individually. And eventually I was like, I do a lot of work and I make like $1 per case. This doesn't really, the math doesn't math here.
But let me ask you a question. Did it teach you how to hustle?
Yes, absolutely. I then evolved to selling air guitars on eBay, and that was a lot more lucrative. So you could sell Jimi Hendrix's air guitar for $5 and not have to do anything, and that worked.
Wait, you didn't ship a box, you didn't ship anything. It was just like, thanks for buying this. You now have Jimi Hendrix's guitar.
Absolutely. I was literally selling air.
Why are you not still in that business?
I don't recall why I quit. I mean, it takes a while to get $5 to compound and turn into something big, but that was the original. I was in a band. I had made a CD duplication company, made a couple $1,000s doing that. So we're talking mid 2000s. I could see the writing on the wall. This is when Apple Music was first starting, and I knew CDs were no longer going to be a thing in the future. So I sold my equipment, liquidated, but had learned a lot more fundamentals of business, accounting. Back then, pay-per-click on Google, it was like 5 cents a click. And now where it's at is just the arbitrage of digital marketing. I learned a lot of things there. Fast forward, I'm at a startup doing IT work. They go out of business, and I made an agreement with the owner. At this point, I'm about a year sober, and I've stopped being so selfish with everything. So I was running the IT department. The owner says, hey guys, family meeting. This is your last paycheck. Don't bother coming in Monday. We're out of business. And my head immediately went to, how can I help this person? And since I was running the IT department, I had said, hey, Dan, we had 500 customers on monthly recurring revenue. Despite ourselves, the company wasn't run well, but we did have a lot of customers. And so I was just like, look, we don't have to tell them we're out of business. I will just keep answering the phone and doing the work. The hardest part is onboarding the new clients. So I'll just do that on the side. And you know what? If I'll just work for free for 2 months, and after 2 months, if the phone rings, they stop paying you, they start paying me. So it's kind of the gym membership model. If they don't use it, you make money. If they do use it, I make money. And that was how my company started in 2014. And we had, talk incremental growth, went from $15 a month to $30 per month to a couple hundred. Then, so year one, we did 36,000, but then we went from incremental growth to explosive exponential growth. The next year and did 1.7 million. The following year, we done 4 million. So it wasn't just taking over those customers. We had found other ways.
And you had a specific niche that you filled. Is that right?
So towards the end, yes. 2014 to 2019, we were IT for everybody. And so where the story starts, the 6,000, 1.7 million, 4.3 million, and then down to 2.5. And then the next year down to 2. And then the next year. So we had the rise and fall. So the fall was where you had mentioned, where we went from IT for everyone to we only worked with accounting firms. We were very blessed that the IRS made a law that essentially said you must hire an IT company. And we were the only company that saw that this law existed. And we just doubled down on it, then tripled down on it, and just became the de facto IT company for accounting firms. We had about 6,000 clients. We sold the company in 2023. At that point, we had about 6,000 clients. And just to paint a picture, the company that bought us was about 40 times larger than we were. They had a head count of 700. We had 12. We'd gone from 50 employees down to 12. And we had 6,000 clients with 12 employees. They had about 30, and this niche was 700 employees. So just to paint a picture of how far ahead we were with this space, we got a huge head start. Universe was very, very fortunate to me and the team, and just, everything happens for a reason. But that was the long and short of it, where we had explosive growth and then explosive declines, a lot of ego, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of issues, especially from 2017 to 2020 when we eventually bottomed out. But, everything happens for a reason, because we were doing so bad from 2017 to 2020. I'm sure most business owners remember 2020 when we had the CARES Act. So we had EIDL and 2 rounds of PPP and ERC. And we could point to, look how horrible our numbers are compared to 2019. They weren't looking at the trend and how this was not because of COVID. If anything, remote tech companies should be thriving.
Right.
But we were able to get a lot of government assistance, which then gave us permission to take big swings. And we were fortunate enough that the accountant one did work out.
That's fantastic. And so I want to bring you back to how sobriety and business success parallel each other. So can we look back at, like, let's say your first year in sobriety, because everybody, and myself included, it was like the habits that I built then enabled me to have long-term sobriety. And what I watch a lot of people do is not commit to the process. And I think that same statement is true for sobriety and for business. So can you tell me, in your business, what did you commit to in terms of creating growth? Like, what was it on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis? What was the commitment?
So I had realized that my life was terrible before I got sober. And even though I didn't want to get sober, I'm pretty analytical. And it was like, if I'm just looking at the scoreboard, me pretending to be sober and going to these meetings and not drinking and having a higher power in my life, if I look at it, this is working out a lot better than it did when I wasn't doing this. So whether or not I believe any of it's going to work, the numbers are showing that it does. So I was pretty sold on the concept of, if I get out of my own way and let the universe unravel as it's supposed to, that whether or not it's my preference at the time, I've come to realize that big picture, things tend to work out in ways that I could have never planned out. So just even starting the company, I was in a halfway house living room. I was going to move out on my own, and a guy had convinced me to stay. Because I stayed, I ended up having the most time in the halfway house. Because I had the most time, they made me a house manager. So I no longer have to pay rent. Then I get approached for a startup. I don't want to take the risk. I tell them no at first, and then I think about it. I don't have to pay rent. Even if this doesn't work out, I'll be okay. So I take that risk. I'm offered, or I interview for a job. This is before that happened. Interview for a job that was going to pay me 5 times what I was making. Didn't get it. That wasn't my preference. I wanted that job. But then at the end, I made thousands X times what I would have been making at that. And so I've taken a step back on expectations and needing things to work out the way that I think that they're supposed to work out. So I have that in my recovery life. So a year later is when the company goes out of business. I start my version of it. And I'm still in the mindset. And mind you, this is my first, air quotes, real company. LLC, business bank account. It's not Andrew in his parents' basement, but we have employees, and payroll, and taxes, and it's more of an actual company. Strangers are my clients, not friends.
It's fucking real.
Yeah, it is a real company. So year one, and mind you, the most I had ever made in a year up to this point was about $20,000. So when I made, well, I grossed 36,000, I net 3,000, but 36,000 was at least still like a big number to where it wasn't disheartening, and I didn't have to pay rent. My overhead on life was very small. I didn't have a girlfriend, didn't have a family. So it was pretty much food where I was spending money. So taking those principles, though, of I don't have expectations on what's going to happen. what needs to happen. I have the strategy and things in place, but if they don't go the way that I think that they're supposed to go, there have just been so many times in my life, and maybe in 2014, I wasn't as aware of it as I am now, but there have been so many times where my preference isn't what had occurred at first, and then either that negative thing turned into something positive, or the universe, I believe, has just a very good balance sheet. And when these negative things happen on one side, it's made up for on the other side. So I've really carried that into my business life. I worked hard to get it, don't get me wrong, but there are also plenty of other people that work hard and don't get the breaks that I was fortunate enough to get. So, the IRS literally made it a law to do business with a company like mine, and we were the only one to choose from. That's not the strategy. That wasn't 2014 me thinking, what's going to happen, right? Like, yes, I saw the opportunity. Other people saw the opportunity. We made a strategy. We capitalized on it. But there were a lot of things.
Wouldn't you agree that opportunity seeks out the prepared?
Yeah, although I'm usually never prepared for things that happen. I've just fallen on my face enough times to stop caring whether or not things work out the way that I think they're supposed to. But maybe prepared isn't the word, but willing to take the chance regardless of the outcome. I'll put it at learned a lot and learned about how niching is very, very, very intelligent to do in a commoditized industry, because everybody's got an IT guy. Everyone thinks that their person is the best because they know how to do more than that person does. It doesn't actually mean that they're good. And we would see it time and time again where, all right, this person's charging you $2,500 a month. Here's the logs. He hasn't logged onto your system or done work for the last 2 years. You're just lucky nothing bad has happened, but nothing is because of him. It's just sometimes things don't happen. And so since it's commoditized, no one knows what a good IT company looks like. You only find out that they're bad when something horrible happens. But we positioned ourselves, literally called Tech for Accountants. So we just worked with accountants. And if you're in the accounting industry and we can speak your language, and we say things like April 15th isn't the only deadline, and their brains are just blown away that we know what an extension is, and that the October 15th is a more important deadline for the tax year. And just these little twists really, really helped, which then after the exit and where I'm at now, where I started a nonprofit called Sober Founders. And, you could think of it sort of a mastermind-esque thing / home group for your business. And the same principles apply there, where if you're looking for a business mastermind, there's a million to choose from. There's nothing special about that concept. If you're looking for something that is just about recovery, there's tons of recovery communities out there. We don't have the monopoly on that either. But that twist that we have is we're the only ones I'm aware of that combine both. And because we are the only ones in that spot, there's a lot of parallels with running the business for the IT company as there is with the nonprofit, that we're positioned in a very unique spot. And with that means I have to throw away a million other opportunities. But the ones that are into it are very into it. Plenty of tire kickers show up once or twice. Hey, it's not for me. It's hard to commit. Perfectly fine. But then there's others that are pretty consistent there almost every week, provide a ton of value and totally get it. And that's what we would see with the tech company. Was all of our clients, they were all the perfect client because we had very narrowly identified who is the perfect client. And that's been something that I've just used across the board in all of the businesses that I've started. But I've thrown away the what needs to happen in order for me to feel like it is working, because I found in my recovery and I found in my business life, things will happen on my higher power's time, not my time. A mentor of mine says, he's like, if you trust in God, he pays, and he pays well, and he always pays on time. May not be on your time, But he'll pay on time. And so I always keep that in the back of my mind as well, where, something out there stopped me from being a raging alcoholic. Something out there made a knucklehead like me a entrepreneur with a company that another bigger company wanted to buy. Even people that show up with the nonprofit, that they like it enough that I believe that people show up because they like it and not because they feel bad for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is my hope, at least.
No, nobody shows up because they feel bad for you ever, in my opinion, unless it's like you ask your sister or your spouse to come with you somewhere, and they'll be like my wife. We were invited to a party for the Pride Festival in Chicago in June. My wife's like, I'll go. And I said, well, what's the hesitation? She said, we're never going to find parking, but I love you, so I'll go. I was like, thanks, I think. So one of the things I observe both in business and in sobriety is that people don't want to take a risk to create something. And what I've heard you talk about is that you are a self-described serial entrepreneur. But what that means is that you're a creator, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where I
And
get my energy.
100% me too. And the other thing is that in sobriety, I'm a creator. And I didn't even know it until I was like 5 years sober, right? But I was in the midst, 5 years in, and I realized that I was creating an actual life for myself, which, all of the drugs that I did and the violence and the blah, blah, blah was in direct opposition of the creation of something that I absolutely. So can you talk about, and this is going to lead us into the next part of the conversation. Part of this podcast is that I make people own what is great about them. So can you talk about, I don't want to say creationism because that has such a negative connotation, but what I do want to say is, can you tell me what you created? And when you started out, because I think that's the biggest obstacle that people have is oh, I have to have $1,000 in the bank. I can't do that. Or I have to have 100,000 or $1 million in the bank. So I can't do whatever it is that I'm thinking about. But what I've experienced, and it sounds very much like you've experienced, is creating something from nothing. So can you speak briefly about that, both from a business and recovery standpoint?
Yeah, it's pretty easy in the recovery standpoint to do the something from nothing, because most people that have an ultimatum of rehab or jail were not coming into it on a winning streak. It wasn't everything's going well and I think I'm going to optimize by cutting back on the blacking out every single day. No, it was a pretty low spot. And I think most people, at least in the addiction recovery space, can empathize with that. But on the business side of coming from an air quotes nothing, I was very naive. I had a big ego. I had some money saved up. I had about 20,000 saved up, and for a 26-year-old, it's pretty good. I did a risk reward analysis of when the opportunity came to me, and basically landed on the realistic worst thing that can happen here is I go out of business, I lose some money, I move back in with my mom. This is the worst thing that can happen. I had moved to Florida for rehab and then stayed. So I could go back to living with my mom, and in the worst case scenarios, let's take a swing. I literally have as good of a situation as anyone. I don't have I need to protect my family. I have absolutely zero. So I gave myself permission because of the situation I was in. But you had mentioned I don't have $1,000. I can't do it. I don't have 10,000. I don't have 100,000. What I've noticed a lot with people in life is a lot of times we need an excuse, or we want to have an excuse to not pursue what we want. A lot of people on earth will co-sign you because they too don't want to take a risk like that. So the sentence, I'm not going to start a company because I have a family to feed and they depend on me. And what if it doesn't work out? And from a logical, rational, that's great. You're protecting your family. But at the same time, what you're saying is, I have a fear of failure and I'm going to put up this wall as an excuse for the fear that is stopping me from being able to create, even if it's coming from nothing. And like I said, my biggest sort of North Star with everything, and when it comes to creating, is essentially it's moved more in this direction now. And it's easier to say since I had my exit and things like that. Just in general, if I'm focusing on helping other people, so I was creating jobs for people. I was helping accounting firms get compliant with their cybersecurity, right? Like I'm no martyr. It's capitalism, but we are still helping people. We're not scamming them or doing something evil, right? It's you need to do this to get your license. We're experts in this space. Let me help you. But the more and more that I find that I focus on helping other people without expecting something in return, things seem to get returned anyway. It stinks that there isn't a formula with it. If I do 2 good deeds, I get 1 lucky break kind of thing. But I just have seen enough times in my experience that if I'm creating, regardless of the risk and potential downside, and in a nonprofit where your salary is $0, it's a pretty low financial upside. There's a literally 0 upside. So it's the nice thing with that though is it forces me to focus on the original goal of helping other people, which is where it started and where it came from, and in its purest form is what it is. And those literal legal guardrails are there to help me from losing sight of what I really wanted to do. And it's really cool to create things and see it helping people, seeing people in the community that I didn't personally connect with each other, thanking each other for helping one another out. And it's cool I made the platform for it to happen, but I didn't say person A talk to person B and there's the connection for you both. It's here's a platform, A and B happened to be on it. They connected and created something great as a result of it, which is that's the biggest thing for me is when other people are helping other people. It's been a really, really different and cool experience that I'm really grateful that it's taken off how it has.
So let's talk for a second about the ego that you had going into owning a small business. In my experience, certainly with myself, I generally always think I'm the smartest person in the room, and how that has hurt me so many times from amazing opportunities. But let's talk about what is it that you see?
So I kind of grew up in a bubble of not necessarily 8th place trophies, but definitely 2nd and 3rd place trophies. And thinking that I was so smart because I went to a no-name school and got decent grades at it. A lot of things on paper made me think that I was better than I was. I recognize that now, but it was the ego helped me because if I look at it black and white today, if past me came to me and said, here's what I'm thinking as a stranger, I would say, you are not taking into consideration boom, 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 boom. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what you're doing. You have no plan. Your plan cannot be in my halfway house living room and see what happens. But that is what the plan started as. And my brain told me that I would make it happen. Eventually, the world hits you in the face and you realize that making $3,000 in 1 year is not good. And I gave up weekends for it. I gave up a ton for it. I'd be out with friends, get a phone call for a $50 deal and be like, okay, I'm out. I'm not going to hang out with you all anymore because I have $50 to make and this is more important than relationships, which are way more important, but you can't necessarily put a number on it. So I started thinking I knew everything. I still today think I know everything, but I at least know that I think I know everything and don't know everything, which is a change from believing I know everything, if that makes sense.
That's a totally different posture. Yeah. Like to be willing to be wrong is a huge gift, in my opinion. So so this leads perfectly into the next part of the conversation that I want to have with you. And so I'll ask this question: what's the greatest thing you've ever done? What's the greatest thing you've accomplished?
So I feel the default answer is having children. I'll reframe your question to what is the greatest thing that I have done that not many other people can say that they have done.
Ooh, I love it.
And through that frame, I'd say building and selling the IT company, it just most people have not had that before. I'm grateful for the giant upswing at the end. I'm also grateful for when I had to tell people, here's only half of your paycheck. You can cash this today. Here's the other half. Call me on Tuesday before you cash it so I can make sure that there's enough money to pay you. So the highs and lows of it. But not only, the financial success is a wonderful thing, but it gave me the ability to do more than just accumulate money and go on vacations, but gave me the freedom and flexibility to be able to help other people, and gave me the understanding. There's a lot of people in the nonprofit space are so focused on the mission that they forget at the end of the day, it's a business. So while I'm still very focused on the mission, I do understand the fundamentals of business and making the business of the nonprofit work, which then gives it more impact. So having that learning experience of the highs and lows, things we did right, things we did wrong, has really benefited me. So in the best thing that I have done that not a lot of others have, I'd put it at building and selling my tech company.
That's interesting. Yeah. I'm so in love with the process of building something, and I have been for many, many years. And what's interesting to me is my primary role in the company that I have, that is primarily a consulting company. And I've been doing it for 28 years. I've had about 1,600 clients, and I've created about $2.8 billion in new sales for my clients. But the fascinating thing for me is that I always have to bring everybody back to the beginning and sort of deconstruct what they've built, and so that they can take an objective look at it. So what I hear you saying, though, is the objectivity that you've gained since 2014, since you started on the living room of your halfway house, the minimum standards that you have in your life, I'm sure, have changed dramatically. Like if you said to your family, let's go live in a halfway house and live off of $3,500 a year, they would probably have a problem with that.
Yeah, that would not fly with. I don't know if my 6-year-old's like Minecraft budget would be able to hold that. He only spends like $10, but it's just
it adds up, man. I just looked at my Uber expenses for the last 2 months, which is about 80% of my son using it, and there was $1,100.
Yeah, so 3,500 does not fly the way that it used to. Even 35,000, if we only looked at the gross, it still wouldn't really, like, we'd get through like a month or two. We're blessed that we're in a position to do that. But yes, the standards have raised, but I always made sure to live within my means. And that was something my parents had taught me early on, that, the reason that I was able to have 20,000, whatever the number was, saved up at 26, to have that cushion, to have that freedom, and why I could live off a low amount of money, because it was, well, if I cook every meal, it costs a lot less than eating out every meal. So I just don't eat out, and okay, cheap groceries it won't.
I think that that's a specific type of psychology. And what I see so much today in both the people I work with, children that are the same age as my children, is this entitlement syndrome that, like, I deserve to be able to go out and dress nice and go to Coachella and blah, 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 all those things. And what's interesting to me is I never, ever felt entitled. I was arrogant. I was all kinds of things. But I feel that I lost my entitlement pretty quickly in my sobriety. It was, and what's interesting to me is, I lived in an area and chose to get sober in an area that was a very low income area. And I grew up in an incredibly wealthy area. And I found that the people that I engaged with in my early sobriety, I was so grateful because it was such an authentic experience. And this leads me to my next and last question is, tell me about what is incredible about Andrew Lassise. And I ask everybody on this show to answer this question. And there's no reframing it, by the way. You got to just face it and deal with it.
What's incredible about me, if you look at it through a less self-righteous, let me change your podcast, Peter. So what's incredible about me is the ability to create and see a bigger picture, not get caught up in the details and minutia. And really what that enables me to do, a guy I worked with, he said he and I both have diet autism, where we can look at things through a black and white lens. We also can communicate with people, but we're analytical enough to look at, even if this doesn't feel like it should work, I can't argue with the results, which is why I believe I was able to stay sober despite not wanting to, as the scoreboard said, me being sober made my life better. And selfishly, who wouldn't want their life to be better? So even though it's not what I necessarily wanted it to look like.
So you've effectively dodged my question entirely, just to be honest with you.
What's incredible about me is my ability to not react off of feelings, but to be able to react based off of facts and experience is the answer.
Incredible. I love that answer. I love that answer because what it provides is from the lens of reality, almost anything is possible, right? However, you do in business and in early sobriety have to have this delusional aspect of yourself where it's like, I quit doing cocaine and heroin and blah, 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 and I'm going to have this big life. Well, the odds are absolutely stacked against you. So the absurdity is almost what is necessary to create success for yourself. But what I also heard you saying is that your rationality and your lack of reaction to external forces is what's been able to create success for you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I'm a big fan of KPIs, tracking them, seeing trends, what is working, what isn't working, and basing the decisions off of facts versus, I heard this one thing this one time and it feels right. Now, I'll go with my heart on trying things and see what happens. And I'd be lying if I said I tracked every single decision that I've ever made and every change that I've made. But the big overarching ideas and concepts and things that have really moved the needle. One of our largest partners in the IT world, our first funnel conversion with them was 4%, and we could tell it was going to be an absolute game changer. By the time we were acquired several years later, that same partnership went from a 4% conversion to a 40% conversion.
Wow.
And that was from knowing the numbers, seeing them, split testing what works, what doesn't. And despite me thinking at the 4% number, this is great, 4% is fantastic, 40% is a lot more fantastic.
That's the absurdity of it all. That's amazing. Well, let's wrap it up. We have 18 seconds left. I'm so grateful that you came on. I appreciate your story. I appreciate your candor and your authenticity. And if you had to say one thing for someone starting a business and one thing for somebody getting sober, what would those two things be, or are they the same thing?
That's a good question. Are they the same thing? I think just get out of your own way and just see what happens. Don't be dumb, but there's other people that have been down this road before. Seek mentors. I wish I had listened to my own advice. That would have made, I learned what I learned, and it is what it is. And maybe that's the lesson too, is learn from your mistakes. But seek mentors, get other people that have what you want, and do what they say regardless of whether or not you think it's going to work.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, man. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
You too.